Good morning. Good morning, everyone. This is kind of a difficult talk for me. I'm going to be honest with you all. This is my beginning talk about self-love, and our first topic that I really need to address is codependency. And the reason codependency is so difficult for me to discuss is, quite honestly, I've never been that. I've never been allowed to be that. Yet by sheer definition, I should be. Isn't that interesting? And so the reason I am saying this is because I want you guys to understand where I see myself in you and where I corrected what should have been my destiny. And a lot of times, the reason we become codependent is because we have not been validated by our parents. We had a rough upbringing. We didn't get the praise. We didn't get the attention. We weren't allowed to be ourselves and patted on the back for it. You know? And so as adults, what happens is we grow up and we start to seek this validation outside of ourselves. It was missing in our childhood, therefore we must seek it. And I really, truly understand that because I didn't have those things. But the difference is, I realized real early on, instead of falling victim to that I had to be my own validating voice. I had to be self-accepting of myself. And that was the only way that others would obviously accept me. Now, this is before I even understood the law. This is before I understood being the source. This is just simply realizing that there's nothing sexier than not caring what other people think of you. Because the only opinion that matters is you. Okay? But in this particular case, I want to help define codependency a little bit. What does it look like? Okay, so here are a few things. It's the need for approval, the desperate need for approval, that in fact allows us to turn a blind eye to very painful things. Meaning that any relationship that we have, be it romantic or any other, friendships, it could take many forms. But we overcompensate. We try and fix their problems. We try and do whatever we possibly can just so they can say, "Oh my gosh, you're wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much." We need that. That is a form of codependency. It's the inability to say no. We can't say no because we're afraid that if we do, they will leave. It's the inability to give voice to anything that we require because we're trying so desperately to get their approval. So we don't want to create conflict. We don't want to say anything. We become this doormat that wants so desperately to do whatever they say that it costs us dearly. We cry. We turn the blind eye when they cheat. We turn a blind eye when they speak to us horribly. We turn a blind eye when they give us scraps. We turn a blind eye when all they want to do is, friends with benefits, or this is different. I don't want to say that that's codependent. Sometimes you get into a mutual agreement. I get that. But I'm talking about accepting some guy saying that, even though you know that's not what you want, because you don't know your worth or your value. It's fear of abandonment. And it's an understandable fear, especially for many of us because of our family upbringing, our things that came up. And I truly understand that fear. And in a way, I did the opposite. I would leave before they did. So although maybe that was a different form of maybe that's how I tried to compensate for that codependency that I was trying to avoid. It wasn't right either. It wasn't. But if you lack self-trust, if you're so afraid to speak up in a relationship, if you're not able to give voice to your needs because you fear that they'll walk out, that is a form of codependency. It is the accepting of treatment that is less than love. And in many cases, empaths, we try to overcompensate. And what do? We attract a narcissist? Well, that narcissist is innocent. That narcissist was actually created from our lack of self-love, and that is the shadow we are attempting to love. That's what it is. And so, of course, we want to blame someone. Of course, we want to say it's them. Of course, we want to do that. But at the end of the day, if we don't control this aspect and understand how that person was made and understand how we got in this situation, we can't get out. Just can't. It's also the person that will do anything to hold on to a relationship. So if they hit us, we're still there thinking that's love. If they go around flirting with other women, we're still there thinking that that's love. But that's not how it works. There's a saying, right? God is a jealous God. That's not literal. What that means is, from the moment that we stop recognizing ourself as love, the deficit was created outside. And that's what we're dealing with. So, how can we fix these things? How can we correct these things? If you've recognized these things in yourself, this talk isn't about, let me beat you up, let me judge you, that's not what this is about at all. It never will be. There is no judgment here. This is more about how do we make the unconscious visible so we can correct it in ourselves. And the most important thing we can do is sit with ourselves and determine who we are. What do we love to do? How do we like to spend our company? What are we doing to really honor and respect who we are? As a child, the one thing my mother used to tell me was, first comes you, then comes you, and then comes you. And I used to, as I got older, when I was little, I accepted it. But as I got a little bit older, I said, but Mom, isn't that selfish? Like, I'm a little selfish. She didn't miss a beat. She looked at me. She said, no, your cup overflows first and foremost. Therefore, you first, you second, you third, and then the overflow is more than enough for everyone else. Because that overflow will be matched by what you are inside. It was something that I needed to hear at the time, because I've realized that wherever I go, thanks to the things that she told me, I'm never treated badly. It's unacceptable. I'm never disrespected. It's unacceptable. Not cheated on. It's unacceptable. I don't turn a blind eye to things that are not love because I must be loved to have love. Another very important fix to this is creating healthy boundaries. You see, many of us, since we've put our power outside of ourselves, our boundaries are determined by someone else. That's not how it works. See, somehow, as women, and I say this as gently as I possibly can, we've somehow forgotten that the relationship is with ourselves. And therefore, to have the relationship with ourselves, we must determine what is acceptable, not acceptable, this list. And there's nothing wrong with having these boundaries. Nothing. It's a fearless sort of acceptance that doesn't try to possess love, that doesn't try to own love, that isn't jealous, that isn't in any way feeling inadequate or not worthy, because they know their own value and their worth. They know what they bring to the table. And it's enough. It's the difference between healthy empathy and sympathy. We don't want to take on everything. That's not what we're here to do. We don't want to take on stuff just so we can be validated. In truth, and I've said this already a lot of times, the sexiest thing that can ever occur is our total lack of caring what others think. Is allowing ourselves to step in our authenticity and being that. And smiling at the world, because that's where the gold is. Now, many of us, for some reason, don't know who that is. In codependent situations, we've determined our value is determined by what we've done for others. And that way we're expecting others to validate what we've done, how we do it, how much, we're waiting for that praise. But if you ever notice, sometimes in relationships, men and women get to the point, for the most part, I will say for most part it's women, because we're givers. I get it. I get that. However, have you ever been in a situation where you've said, I've given, I can't give no more? You recognize that? Of course you can't give anymore. You keep waiting for some praise that is never going to come, because the praise comes from you. We can't give everything and take and have nothing in return. We have to have balance. We fall in love with our own reflection. There's no exceptions to this, even when it's a deficit. And the purpose of that is to correct ourselves in order to heal the other person automatically. Because when we're healed, the other person reflects exactly what we are. It's law. It's law. I've never tried to own anyone. I'm not jealous. In relationships, they could be standing next to the most beautiful women on earth. No problem. No problem. Why? Because I know what I am. I know what I bring to the table. I know that I am the blessing. And if he, for any reason, doesn't recognize that, time to walk out the door, baby. I'm not afraid to leave. I'm not afraid for someone to leave me. No. I want to be love, because outside will match what I am inside. But love isn't ownership. Love is not depending on a guy to make you happy. That's not how it works. Many of us trying to manifest SPs and trying to do all of this, God, I'll be happy when he's here. I swear. Do you realize that that is a burden that we're placing on another human being? We're expecting them to make us happy. That's not how it works. First, we're happy, and then they add to our joy. And then in this case, a heart energy is magnified. It matches, there's no deficit, and then the miracles occur in between. The miracles that occur in between, that's the kingdom of God. That's heaven. Because now, just like in Revelations, and I say this all the time, the measuring stick for 3D is Revelations 21-16, where the city equals truth. When your truth, your inner truth, matches outside, now we are in the right place. But when we somehow feel like there's less being given, that's not going to work. Because we're not following through with what the Bible said. We cannot find love if we don't become love, if we don't recognize it in ourselves. And there's no amount of overcompensating we can ever do to anyone. My mom taught me this a long time ago. If you give someone your hand and they take your arm, lesson learned, walk away. Because that's unacceptable. You can't give and give and give and expect somehow to be loved. It doesn't work that way. And the inner strength comes from total and complete lack of fear and total and complete acceptance. And if we have had relationships that have been less than stellar, if we've fallen into these patterns, at some point, we can blame them all we want. But at some point, we're going to have to recognize that the only reason those reflections exist is because we shorted ourselves. And ourselves alone. I don't know how else to say these types of things. And it was very difficult. You guys, I made this my first live video because I've never been allowed to be codependent in that way. Even as I serve everyone in my community, everybody that I work with, I'm not seeking approval. I'm seeking to stand as the example of what happens when you just simply don't care what others think and you want to remind them of who they are, because when doing so, they stand up in their own power. Most people, I don't have an agenda. I don't have an agenda in terms of that. I just believe in everyone's divinity. And once it was awoken in me, I needed to share it with everybody else, because that's the only way for my reflection to be equal on all sides. And many times it appears as if I'm helping others. All I'm doing now that I'm healed is standing in my wholeness so that others can remember this. But it's not about seeking approval. It never will be. It's about our own self-acceptance. It's about not bending over backwards. Many of you found that when you treat someone, I don't know, less than, have you ever noticed? It's the ones you don't really pay much attention to that just fall all over themselves to please you. It shouldn't be that way. But you can be on either end of those deficits and they don't feel good. Or you can fall in love with yourself. You can take time to invest in yourself. You can take time to discover who you are. You can take time to discover what you love to do. You can take time to enjoy your own company. And then, and only then, can someone share in your joy. When you really know what that is, if a man in any way or a woman in any way treats you badly, the very first thing we do is say unacceptable. And we call them on it. That is a healthy boundary. And we can do it respectfully because, of course, we're going to be on the receiving end of what we put out. That's law. It's law. So we become what we want to have, and we own what we've been, and we can correct it. But first and foremost, it begins with not accepting scraps. Most people say that to me. They're like, I don't understand. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. And I'm like, but you accepted scraps from another person? And somehow you want to beg for them to come back? That's not self-love. That doesn't work that way. However, if you change and you flip the script and you say, hey, you know what? I do deserve better. You know what? I'm not someone's doormat. You know what? Holy cow, I'm the kingdom of God. That is my present. That's my gift. That's who I am. And when you recognize this in yourself, I promise you, every single human being on earth, including an abundance of men or women, are drawn. They're drawn because we're standing as that example for others. And when you stand as that example for others, you would be surprised at how beautiful that reflection is outside of you. It's just gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. And then when you access that divine love in you and you see it outside of you, this is what I call the Adam and Eve template. It's not about gender. It's about masculine and feminine energy in balance within ourselves, and then that whole reflection being outside and being equal. That is a beautiful thing. Extremely beautiful thing. This is what we're after. This is what we need to correct. There's no one to blame. There's no one in our reality but us. God can never be separated. God can never be separated. We must unify our collective self and our individual self and love that. That divine marriage needs to occur in order to have loving, healthy relationships. Because it's automatic. We respect others because we respect ourselves. And we know that that's our reflection. But since we're the source, people naturally respect you because you respect yourself. We love others because we love ourselves. So they will match our reflection and they will be exactly as we are inside. A lot of times I say 3D must cower down because what is above must be made manifest below. What is within must be without. I'm not saying anything that's not true. It's been written this way. It's been written for us to understand. And yes, I get it. Some of us have a little work to do. And that's okay. That's why I'm here. Because we're going to fix these things. We're never going to be needy again. Not ever. There's nothing to fill. What need? Lack of self-love? That's an internal job. And that's what we got to work on together. And perfectly fine doing that with you all. But as long as we recognize that there is nothing out there and that it must match what we are inside, that's the beginning. That's the beginning of controlling our universe. And at the end of the day, that's why God put us on earth. To fall in love with ourselves. Because when we do, earth becomes a whole different view. A totally different view. When we recognize God in every human being, because we know that God is love, and love is the only constant, we're in balance. but it's not visible until we become love ourselves. And that's what I want to make sure to convey. I do understand codependency, our need for validation. I get it. I do. It may not have been my path, but it was supposed to be. And maybe that's why I can stand right here as the voice of what I'm not. And together we can work on this. Together we can learn to love ourselves. Together we can learn to recognize ourselves in every human being. Together we can learn that there's nothing out there that will ever provide anything if we don't have it in ourselves first. That's my talk for today. I don't want to take up too much time. I know it's Sunday morning. Some of you may be headed to church. Some of you may have other things that you're doing, maybe last minute Christmas plans. But I want to just say thank you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Thank you for understanding where I'm coming from. And thank you for allowing me to go on this journey with you. I'm doing this because I think everybody deserves to see what their reflection is like when they're in love with themselves. I don't have words to convey how beautiful it is. It's a gift that God gave us. It's a gift. And it means so much. And you will never take it for granted once you've found it. So that way, you're never taken for granted either. You see how it works? Change begins with the man in the mirror first. So let's heal, you guys. Let's heal together. Let's stand as one love, because love is the only thing that's real in a sea of illusions, in the sea of multiverses, and all of these possibilities. In eternity, everything exists. If you want to believe in the devil, you can have your pretend little devil out there. No problem. Everything exists. But in a sea of illusion, the only thing that's real is love. So let's be that first. And then the rest will be proven to you. I promise. Namaste, you guys. Be talking to you guys soon. I love you. I love you so much.